Folks, welcome back to Tabletop Tactics with myself, Lawrence the Spider, and today, Joe the Beard is with me. We are here to discuss a hot topic, or maybe it's not that hot.
Hang on. It's pretty hot.
It's magma.
Hey now!
So, is 9th edition too complicated?
Yes.
Oh, you think so? Okay, well, that was quick.
Video over. Thanks everyone, we'll see you next time.
So the idea of this is to be just that, a discussion, something that you guys can also get involved with in the comments below. We very much look forward to discussing it further with you there. It sort of came about the other day because a guest came in with laminated cards, like a cheat sheet, if you like, on what to do with his army. So we thought, well, let's make a video on this.
Yeah.
So the order of the day will be this. First of all, we're going to discuss, do we actually think it's too complicated? I don't know if you actually do or not. So we'll have a little discussion about that. Then if we do think that it is too complicated, we'll discuss why that is. Maybe take a little trip down memory lane to see when the complications started coming in.
Ooh, that's nice.
Why not? Because I've played multiple editions, so I can always look back. And then if we've got to some conclusions, we'll discuss some solutions. Yeah. What could be done to simplify, streamline, or maybe make it play even better than it currently does. So that's the order of the day. Let's get into it. Is 9th edition too complicated? That's coming up next. So be it. Let's put it on the table. I mean, you said automatically yes before we even begun.
Jump the gun.
You jumped the gun. But all jokes aside, this is a discussion. You know, I'm not going to sway you either way. I've got my own opinions on it. What do you think of 9th edition? Has it gotten too complicated? Maybe you're happy with it rules-wise as it is. Talk to me. What's your thoughts on it?
It's a very big question, which is convenient because otherwise this would be a very short video. Yeah. So I started in 7th edition, which was very complicated in terms of the core rulebook.
Yeah.
I remember looking at it for the first time and I said, that's a chunky boy.
Yeah.
And I said,
Yeah, that's intimidating.
Yeah, can't fit all this in the old brain box. Yeah. So comparatively, in terms of the core rules, no.
Right.
It's not. Yeah. Because I came for a time where it was how many pages of rules are there? Like
I think
100,
you had
right?
over 100 pages.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's like, what, 18, 12?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is not complicated.
Yeah. And interestingly, when the rumours started swirling about 8th edition after 7th, people were like, no! Yeah. It's going to be too straightforward.
It'll be too simple.
Far too simple. Yeah. And that's going to cause all sorts of problems.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's funny how things come around again.
Yeah, because there was a bit of talk about like it was going to be Sigmar'd, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, like, because some people thought Sigmar was too simple.
Yeah, there was outrage, but then when it actually dropped, it was fine. Yeah. So from the core rules, no, it's actually a far simpler system. When you then start putting on things like the codexes, which to be fair, you have to have for your army rules.
Every edition has had a codex.
You're going to have a codex.
Yeah.
But on top of that, you've then got codex supplements as well, which started coming in 7th or 8th.
Yeah, supplements. Well, so, I mean, you had supplements actually started a few editions previously, but they weren't as prevalent.
Sure. Wasn't for every faction.
No, but you had formations, remember? So the supplements came out with formations in 7th. That was the big thing.
You want all your Space Marine vehicles for free?
Yeah.
Buy this right now. So there was that. Yeah. Then you've got stratagems on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That started in 8th,
Yeah. Then you've got FAQs.
You got FAQs,
And then you've got chapter approved.
Yep.
Et cetera, et cetera. Yep. Now, some of that stuff is necessary to keep balance and address issues and things like that.
Yeah. And we are getting a faster release rates, you know, and I completely appreciate there's many of you out there which are like, it's not fast enough. It's not good enough. And hey, look, if I had the magic wands to make every codex release at the same time, you better believe I would be using that magic wand. Yeah. But the reality is we have absolutely no control over that. And there is a whole bunch of things which go into printing and releasing books, you know, distribution, artwork, models being made, etc., etc. So, you know, it's a lot more complicated than I just want all of my books at the same time.
Yeah.
But so I appreciate both sides, both points of view.
But you raise a very good point, because something that I've seen, this isn't related to the actual game as such, but something I've seen over and over again with the new Codexes is, wow, this artwork is amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
And if they hadn't invested the time in that, it would have been missed.
Yeah.
Because from my opinion, the artwork in 8th edition was pants. I didn't like it.
Oh, really?
It was too clean, and
Yeah.
it wasn't
Not for you?
No.
Fair enough.
No. What they got right now, it's very nice.
Useful. Yeah.
Yeah, so slight tangent, but yeah, like you said, there's a lot of elements that come into making all these things. It's not just about the rules.
Yeah.
But anyway, so with all of those things combined, and if I put myself into the shoes of like a brand new player,
Yep.
it's like, here's all this stuff that
Yeah.
you're going to need
Yeah.
to effectively play the game.
Yeah.
Now, maybe not everyone wants to use all that stuff.
No. So could the counter argument be, well, look, you've just come into your Games Workshop or your friendly local gaming store for the first time. You just pick up your Codex. You know, you don't know. You probably won't even know that there's these FAQs and these campaign supplements, etc., etc. So you could just go home and use your book.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're just playing with your buddies at home, I think you'd be very happy just cracking on.
Sure.
But even without that, the books now, yes, they have all of these stratagems. You've got army rules. You've then got sub-faction rules. You've then got rules if you are a pure detachment. So there's a lot of rules to go through in that codex alone.
There are. However, I think if you are playing a single faction,
Yeah.
that is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because if I like the look of Chaos Space Marines, which I do,
Yeah.
for better or for worse,
Yeah.
And I pick Iron Warriors, and I've got this specific thing for my army, which is good, but there are some things in 9th edition which have bulked out to the point where does become a little unmanageable.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the problem is that the minute you put your toes in the water, you get your codex, and maybe you're playing at home just with your friends, whatever. But the minute you expand, and usually, let's face it, most people get into the game because they've been introduced to it by someone that's already playing, or they're very young and they walk into a Games Workshop where you're actually still introduced to it because you're given an intro game.
Sure.
The point is you're given a basic version of the game, and you're going to need to find other players that play, usually experienced ones. And those experienced ones are going to have all of this knowledge, and they're going to have all of these supplements and FAQs and all of that jazz. Oh no, you've got to play it this way. This isn't that points. The points in your book is incorrect.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually got to use this FAQ, which changes your points. So there's a lot. There's a lot. Yeah. I would argue that actually it's been complicated for quite some time. But we can talk about that perhaps if we go down memory lane. So, all right. We came to this point of conversation because Ian came in as a guest.
He did.
He had his stratagems printed out on a sheet of paper, because the ones that he would always use, with all of his units, data sheets. I think he was using Battlescribe for the purpose, and he just got it all printed out, and he had little flashcards, didn't he?
Laminated, no less. And then they're going to get a lot of use.
Yeah, and then Stig, when AdMech came out, created a cheat sheet for him to use so that he could work out which aura was going to go off onto which unit, and it synergized with this, and what stratagem to use where, because his Marshal did this, his Dominus does that, you know, and this is because of, again, stratagems by multiple warlord traits, multiple relics which give off different effects and abilities and auras. That's a lot of bookkeeping for one army.
And that's the most extreme example.
It is an extreme example.
Because that book, the core rules for the units give all that complication. And that's just a bulky book.
Yeah.
I think things like stratagems, which you see in every book, I think that's where there's a bit too much, because there are so many to choose from, and because you can use so many of them in a single phase, let alone a single turn.
Yeah.
Less so for your own army, but if you're facing another army which you're not familiar with and you want to do stuff, you might not be able to do that stuff because you don't know what crazy stratagems that you can be thrown.
Well, you touch on an interesting point there, because that's where it becomes, that's where for me it does actually become genuinely complicated, because even if you're playing the game at a high level, so, and by high level, I mean, say you're a tournament regular, or you play every week, your friendly local gaming store. It doesn't even mean that you need to be good at the game, okay? Whatever that means. It just means that you play the game regularly, that you know your army, I'm going to say, pretty well, right? You know your stratagems, you know what the army can do. But you can't just turn up at a table. This is an interesting thing since 8th. You can't just turn up at a table, apart from one point in 8th, which I'll talk about later on. You can't turn up at a table and say the person's got their whatever army, Death Guard army, which you've not played before, okay? Or you've played it once or twice. You may have even played it 6 times over a period of a year, but you've not played it regularly enough, and you've not read the book, as much as your own. You don't know what all of the stratagems do. You just don't know. Previously, in previous editions, what you could do is you could say, oh, what does this unit do? And the person could show you the data sheet or the entry in the codex, or just reel off what the stats of the damage, the weapons do.
Yes.
And you'd have a pretty solid idea on what it could do. The problem is that stratagems radically affect these units, sometimes amplifying their damage to disproportionate levels, right? And suddenly makes what is a moderate threat into a super high priority threat, which you just won't be aware of unless you know all of the stratagems.
Yeah, and if we look over here, not many people have access to all of this all the time.
Right.
We're very lucky because we have all of the books.
Right.
So we can just
and we play a lot all the time.
Yeah, we play a lot.
Yeah.
The average person isn't going to have more than, I don't know, unless you collect multiple armies, you're not going to have more than one codex.
Yeah.
So you've got no idea.
That's right.
Really, what you're going to be facing.
And here's the kicker. Like, because I have been known to dabble in tournaments in my time.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. And I know most of the armies pretty well, and I know most of the big stratagems. When you go to a tournament, you pretty much know what the competitive stratagems are that are being used. I say pretty much. Even then, I play some of the top players. They're still looking stuff up.
Yeah.
They're still. How many CP does that cost? What does this stratagem do? And the sportsman, if the good sport will say, look, by the way, I've got a couple of stratagems which this might allow me to advance and charge. So just bear in mind that when you're deploying.
Oh, we do it in every game.
Yeah, we do it in every game.
Yeah.
But it obviously that's down to the player. And there's certainly people out there which will go, well, it's a competitive event. You should know the opponent's stratagems. So, I can understand that. That's not personally how I would do it. I don't agree with that. I think you should just. The problem is there's even Chef, and he's got an almost encyclopedic knowledge, can't reel off all of the stratagem combos.
It's just saying something.
Yeah, he's got a freakish mind with just referencing rules and coming up with bits. My point is that it is too complicated to tell you. And the thing is you're at a table, you can't go, and you don't want to. You don't want to have to spend an hour explaining what the potentials of your army are that it can do. It's too much. It's ridiculous. So now with the introduction of these stratagems, but we'll take a trip down memory lane in a moment. 40k has always been pretty complicated, but it certainly added a level of admin and complication because it's a new resource management as well with the command points, because it's only 2 editions old. Is now becoming even more complicated with supplements, because guess what? They give you more stratagems. And now we're seeing FAQs to try and fix those stratagems because they make certain units too powerful or too many combinations, or it was, an unintended use. So, okay, I think it's fair to say that, look, whether you like the complexity or not, doesn't really matter. Is it too complicated from a beginner's point of view? I would argue, yes, I would. I think the minute you pick up your codex, the codex is already meaty. There's a lot going on. You've got sub-factions to pick, army special rules to memorize, all of the stratagems that you can do, plus then the data sheets will have their own special rules and stuff like that they've got on top of that as well. It's a lot to take on board. Let's now try and work out how we've gotten to this point. When did this start? We're going to take a little trip down memory lane. So, where did this all start?
How did we get here?
Hasn't 40k always been complicated? Well, Isn't that the answer?
Kind of. But it depends, isn't it?
It does depend, yeah. And it's always subjective and relative, right?
If you go by the core rules, like I said before, from 7th to 8th, it was a complete change, like night and day.
Simpler than ever.
Yeah, super simple.
Yeah.
But then there's all this extra stuff on top, which then makes it a bit complicated again.
Yeah, it's a funny one.
in some ways, being a complicated game is cool because it then means that all sorts of stuff can happen and it's exciting.
Yeah.
The same game is never, ever, ever going to happen twice.
No.
You're never going to have the same
it's
game
great.
twice.
It's great depth in 40k. That's what keeps it really interesting, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But should a game be quite as taxing as it is on the old brain box? I'm not a big competitive player.
Sure.
In terms of like going to tournaments on a regular basis.
Sure.
The ones I've gone to, if I've done 2 days of gaming,
I know it's exhausting.
I am spent after that.
Everyone I've met is like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you top competitive players are like after the 6 games, especially if you've done two days of 3 games, by the end of it you're like, whew.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. Well, second edition was super complicated as well.
Okay, I'm not familiar with second.
No, so the reason I'm going to bring this up to you now is because when second edition was basically designed as a skirmish game. Rogue Trader was a skirmish game. You're supposed to have like, you know, a dozen models a side sort of thing, maybe 20 models. Second edition, they expanded on it and had really, really cool things. In fact, some of the 8th edition stratagems and 9th edition stuff that's come about is back in second edition, there was a box set called Dark Millennium, which gave you a whole bunch of war gear cards, generic war gear cards which could be given to different armies. And they had like mission special rules and stratagem-esque style things, which were really, really good fun. But the game was a lot smaller. There weren't as many models. Okay, so the game would still take probably 2.5 hours to play because of all of this extra complication. But, you know, you weren't playing with as many models, so it sort of balanced out. Then third edition came around and it was a massive reset. Now the reason I bring up third edition is because the third edition reset was probably as big from second to third as it was from 7th to 8th. It was that big. Okay. And it was super simple. They went the other way. So second edition, the codexes were thick and had lots of lore and really cool stuff in it. Third edition codexes were almost pamphlets in comparison.
Oh, wow.
And there was a huge outrage, you know, back in the days, like, this is ridiculous. But what Games Workshop had realized at that point is that the price of entry to learn to play the game was so high that it was just too intimidating. You know, it was an amazing game if you knew how to play it. But boy, oh boy, did you had to really get your academics on to learn how to play it. Like second edition, you had rules like for hiding units. You had rules for like vehicles had different armor facings and damage points on. It was super crazy complicated. A lot of fun, but very complicated. So when third edition came about, it was super simple. It actually played really quickly.
Okay.
It played really quickly. Like you could turn the game around, and back then, like the standard was still 1,500 points, as I recall. You could turn a 1,500 point game round in an hour and a half, 90 minutes, no problem. Okay. It was actually still really good fun, and it also was tactical, but it was a little bland.
Right.
And because the books didn't come out very quickly, because this is back in the dark ages where Games Workshop weren't releasing things very fast, it got a little bit more stale if you played regularly. You'd sort of tend to know, because back then there weren't as many unit options either, so you wouldn't get as much variety, but was really fun to play and was very quick to play. Then they introduced fourth, complications started coming back in. First, I think it was fourth, which came up with the Eye of Terror supplement, which actually was just a cool supplement to give you different types of armies to play. Sure. And then, you know, fifth came about, which was another big change. Fifth played, again, pretty fast, which was good, and was actually a pretty balanced edition. It was one of the better editions until the Matt Ward codexes dropped, and those codexes were so much more powerful than everything else that they just sort of steamrolled everything. Right. But they were quite good against each other, so he sort of balanced them against each other, but left the rest of the codexes way far behind. So yeah, you know, that was the thing that happened. Then sixth came about, and we started to see a lot bigger introduction of psychic phases, and I think it was sixth which came about with invisibility for the first time, or was that seventh? Seventh had the Death Stars with invisibility. I think seventh had
invisibility. Yeah. Well, it definitely did.
Yeah. So, you know, by the time that we got to seventh, So this is the funny thing. By the time we've gone from being super simple, probably too simple, you could argue, to adding in more complexity, adding more in, until we got to 7th, and then we had the height of the Death Stars.
Yeah.
You know, the Thunderwolf Death Star, the invisibility, invisible units, invisible Wraith Knights, and in previous editions you had unkillable units where you'd have a different weapon on each unit, because you could allocate wounds to models with different weapon types. So basically one would have a combi melter, one would have a combi plasma, one would have a chainsword, one would have, it was really weird and ganky. Yeah, it was just janky. So anyway, it was a way of like maximizing your unit's efficiency. So then at the height of 7th, you had multiple decks of psychic powers, because when that supplement came out, we had access to all of the different types of powers. You'd have these psychic Death Stars. You'd have, your re-rollable invulnerable saves, all this sort of jazz.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. And I think GW recognized, and the game was playing long. It was playing long, It was a struggle to do a 2,000 point game or 1850 game. I think it was the standard back then in 3 hours, which shouldn't have been the case. Now there's going to be people out there which go, oh, well, I always finish my games on time. And that's fine. That's good for you. There were plenty of people that didn't. And it never used to be an issue in earlier editions where it was simpler. So that already indicates that you put more in the game, you make models cheaper, you put more models on the table, you add more rules, it's going to play longer.
Yep.
There's no two ways about it. We've gone from a 90-minute, 1,500 point game to a 3-hour game. I think the standard at tournaments now is 2 hours, 45 minutes is what they give you.
Right.
It's nearly 3 hours to turn around a game. That's a long time.
Yep.
That's a long time, in my opinion. Because actually, if you could play more games, you'd actually get better results for tournaments anyway, if you want to talk about ranking people competitively. But there it is. That's another argument. We could do a whole video on that. But I get it. It's because people want more toys on the table.
Which is understandable.
Which is understandable. But from a tournament point of view, actually, you should play more games. They should be faster, and you'd get more interesting rankings. But there we go. So that aside, 8th edition happened, complete reset. And for the first time, stratagems came about.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to challenge you here and say that the beginning of 8th was epically awesome. Because remember the indexes came out? Because they reset everything so hard, they had to reset all of the books.
Everything, yeah.
The codexes were gone.
Yeah.
And for a while there, the games did play real quick.
Yeah.
And it was really simple,
because everything,
but still really good.
Yeah, everything was on a completely level playing field, weren't they?
For the first time ever, GW had actually released everything at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, some broken combos came about. The Razorwing Flocks, Yunari eventually, all this sort of jazz, okay? But if you would have just did the points on the Razorwing Flocks or the unit size, which they did via an FAQ at some points, that actually fixed that problem quite quickly. Then what happened is Yunari came about and more stratagems came about, and Codexes came out with the stratagems. But if you just had the core rulebook with the core stratagems and the indexes with all of their data sheets, the game played really fast, was still complex enough to be interesting, and was still really, really cool and good fun. So then, we're now here in 9th edition. We have stratagems everywhere. We have supplements everywhere. We have FAQs to fix those things everywhere. We have had points go down in 8th, then seen points have gone back up in 9th. So I think GW recognised, the game's playing longer and longer and longer. Now we're going to have to try and hammer down on that. So I think we've come to the point now where stratagems are almost out of control.
I probably agree. I think, depending on whose stratagems we're talking about.
Absolutely. Some people have rubbish stratagems.
Yeah. Well, look at Chaos Space Marines.
Yeah.
That's. I don't remember where Chaos Space Marines came after 8th edition was launched. I don't know if they were an early or a late book. Yeah. But at that point, you sort of had stratagems for specific units, a few for infantry.
Yeah.
they weren't particularly, like, you couldn't use one stratagem on many different things.
Yeah.
Whereas now we're seeing that you have an infantry stratagem,
Yeah.
which is causing all sorts of problems with AdNec and
That's right.
so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think there was a good intention with stratagems at the beginning that you would give your the units you want to use some extra oomph or some extra flavour, however you want to think about it.
Well, it was supposed to be like an army special move.
Sure.
Like that was what was first heralded as in 8th edition. It's like a special ability that you don't get to do very often, but when you do, it's big.
Yeah. And again, to that point, one of the problems is that now where you have, I don't know, an average, let's say you start with 12 command points, those stratagems then aren't special.
Yeah.
Because you can do them over and over and over again.
Right.
On multiple different things.
Yep.
So you're not making that one unit any more special because most things can do it.
Yep.
And where you can regenerate command points and you can do stratagems for free with some things.
Yeah.
They then become
AdNec have that ability.
really watered down.
Yeah. And you can super buff a unit by giving them multiple stratagems.
Sure.
As well.
Yeah. So I think the intention at the beginning may have been quite different. And what it's become now is just a bit much.
Yeah.
Not so much for your own army, but when you're facing other ones.
Yeah, because the combinations become.
Yeah, that's where it gets hard. And there's no...
hard to balance.
Yeah, there's... Oh, it's very hard to balance. There's no way of knowing what stratagems your opponent's going to use, especially if you're not familiar with the army that you're facing.
Yeah.
All the cool stuff you might want to do with your specific units could be completely nullified.
Yep.
On one side of the coin, you could say, well, that's strategic play from your opponent. The other side of the coin is that that's just kind of disappointing as a player. Yeah. Because you're wanting to do this cool stuff. Yeah. But then it's just denied for whatever.
Well, yeah. I mean, and imagine, like, just put yourself. It's very difficult, like, especially when you've got competitive 40k players. That, oh, I know all the rules. It's not complicated. Don't underestimate how long it's taken you and how many games you've played to get to that point.
Yeah.
Just rewind back to being a beginner, and you go, whoa, that's a lot. And imagine you get this new unit, it's really cool. You know it's supposed to be a really good anti-tank thing, and the person's got a bunch of stratagems which basically completely nullify your unit's effectiveness.
Yeah.
You leave that hobby store having probably freshly painted your unit going, oh.
Yeah.
You know, it's that sort of gotcha moment, which unfortunately I think is just stratagems, any sort of power building game like that, you know, like Magic the Gathering, you play this card, I'll play that, you play that. In Magic the Gathering, though, it's not a 3-hour game, and you're playing a game knowing that these are the combo decks that I'm going to be doing.
Sure.
So now you've got that sort of element in 40k, which is very, very hard to balance, because you know you get the whole thing with points. What do you punish the unit because maybe it could have this stratagem on? Obviously, no is the answer. But then the stratagem might only be good on that unit. So what do you do? Make the command point so high that it's not, well, it's too difficult to use. It's a really, really difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So okay, I think we've discussed memory lane. We sort of understand how we've gotten here. I think we're probably on the same page by the sounds of it.
I'd say so. Maybe the same paragraph.
Maybe the same paragraph. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it down below. However, I'm not a glass half empty sort of person. If I identify a problem or something which I think it would be cooler if we could change or make better, I'm going to offer some solutions. So let's talk about some of those. Well, Mr. Beard, let's talk some solutions, please, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so obviously, stratagems are just one aspect of 9th edition. Their complication, as we've discovered, is already layered, but stratagems do add quite a lot of extra complication. Now, I know, there's a bunch of you out there which love stratagems. They're like, it's the best thing ever. And I get it. Like, it's cool. Like, being able to do special moves is a cool thing. However, wouldn't it be cool? So I'm going to come in with the first solution.
Okay. I'm ready.
This is based on people that absolutely have to have stratagems.
Sure.
They love them. Mm-hmm. They do not want to see stratagems gone. And also, let's face it, they're here now, aren't they? So they're not about to go anywhere. But because obviously the easy solution is you just remove stratagems from the game and it just carries on as normal.
Yeah, and then you just ignore the pages in the codexes.
Yeah. And obviously no one's going to do that. Everyone's going to carry on playing with the new rules. But let's just say like Games Workshop did a reset, you know, 50th edition or something, you know. They could just remove that element, and it's been shown before. They can change the whole game if they want to. But aside from just ham-fistedly removing stratagems, what you could do is, instead of a codex and in supplements on top of it, adding another 2 pages of stratagems and relics, which is just ridiculous. Why not have the main rulebook as your source of stratagems? They're universal stratagems. We've already got some, which are the most used ones anyway. Command reroll.
Yep.
Auto pass morale once per game. You know, interrupt.
Yep.
So what if you had in the main rulebook, you know, an advance and charge, you know, whatever it may be, not a shoot twice, because I think we should get away from that because it becomes very, very difficult to balance. But, you know, like a +1 to hit, or, you know, whatever it may be, okay? And that you've got in the main rulebook 2 pages of generic stratagems, and that each codex gave you, each sub-faction had a single stratagem.
Okay.
So you still get your flavor of having your own army stratagem, but when you turn up to a table and say to the person, hey, what does your stratagem do? It's very different, because it's like an army rule, an army special rule. And obviously you try and make the codex specific army stratagem really good and strong for the army. Something which will be relevant to the army all the time. A special move that they can pull out if they need to. That way, it's a much easier discussion, right? I turn up to the table, be it a tournament, be it a friendly game at a friendly local gaming store, and you're not going to be caught off guard because you're all basically using the same thing and there's only one thing for you to learn.
Right.
How does that sound?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it would just be a second army rule rather than the stratagem.
Basically, yeah, but it's something that they can spend.
Yeah, but I get having more universal ones in the main rule book, because there's plenty of them that you see in multiple codexes that are repeated. So why not have them? I mean, some of them. I mean, some armies. You mentioned advanced and charge. Some armies advanced charge does make a whole bunch of sense.
Sure.
But I get where you're coming from.
I mean, you know, that's just an example.
Yeah, just for everyone to be, you know, like
maybe an advance and charge would be a specific army one, like Tyrannid's got it or something.
Perhaps.
You know, that is a powerful one, right? And very relevant to Tyrannid.
Wow.
Okay, so we've established a couple of bits there.
Sure.
So that's my solution. Do you have one? What would you do?
I like the idea of not having so many command points for an army in a game. Yep. I mean, unless you're chef and you can make yourself have 0 command points, so everything's done. Begins, I like the idea. Let's say you're playing, you're organising to play a game with your mate, right? Yep. You're going to meet up for the weekend. They're going to come around your house and you're going to play a game. Yep. And you're going to send them your roster in advance. You know what you've got.
Yeah.
I like the idea of your stratagems being part of that roster.
Yep.
So you have to pick them before the game starts.
Oh, that's cheeky. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's nice. So you sort of build a deck, if you like.
I'm a big deck building fan. I really like Maelstrom. So Maelstrom, the old version of Maelstrom where you have the cards, big fan of that.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a new beta version that came in White Dwarf recently, but the Maelstrom of War where you build your deck and you have up to 18 cards.
It's good fun.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
It gave lots of variety, but also you could build it around the theme of your army. So you know what your army does, you know how you've built and designed your army. The cards then emphasize that to another degree. Yep. But you're not just throwing stuff at your opponent randomly. Yeah. You know.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of it being organized and then not adjusted throughout the game over and over again.
Yeah, I dig that. And also that sort of solution would be a lot easier, because unfortunately my solution doesn't work.
Because of all the stratagems.
Well, all of the books already exist and all the stratagems are out there. But I mean, if I had, this is a wish list, the magic wand moment. Right?
That's like a 7th to 8th example.
Yeah, the thing is you'd have to reset. But you see, I'd be on board with that. Honestly, I would, because the problem is that you get a new codex that comes out, and if it is too powerful, it just ruins the rest of the books in terms of their 8th edition books are already massively struggling. Some can be made to work. That's another conversation.
But some don't.
They really don't.
I'm of the opinion.
They really don't. You know.
A strong opinion here. Codex Chaos Space Marine should no longer be sold. It is shocking that book is printed and sold.
It's
because there's so much in it that is completely invalid.
I know.
So much. It's crazy.
The sad thing is like you bring up that example. You've got the Forge Fiend in the Thousand Suns Codex, which is actually really good now.
It's so frustrating.
Really good unit now.
Yeah.
But the Chaos Space Marines have this other Forge Fiend, like the Forge Fiend's little cousin, which has been
worse
forgotten
weapons, worse ballistic skill, no invulnerable save.
Yeah, I know. Oh no, the Forge Fiend has an invulnerable save.
Oh, you good point.
Yeah,
It's
but it's still
I'm thinking of the tanks.
skill. Yeah.
The Predator.
Yeah.
That's Predator.
I know.
You know what my Predator has?
I know.
Nothing.
I know. It is what it is, you know. Like still one wound Chaos Space Marines, but yeah, this is why I'm all for resets. I mean, personally, if I could wave a magic wand, everything would be released at the same time. Obviously.
I mean, there are reasons. There's reasons why it's taken so long with this edition. Obvious reasons.
Yeah. Like the pandemic has, you know, it's not like GW don't want to either. I you know, the pandemic has slowed a lot of stuff down and even pushed releases back.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately the way it is. But you know, that 8th edition reset I thought was brilliant. In fact, it's one of the most fun I've had playing any of the editions in the game.
So at that point,
there was a beautiful simplicity to it.
So when that dropped, I was on my honeymoon actually.
Yeah.
Old
indexes.
The PDF came out.
Yeah.
So we had all the points resets.
Yeah.
What I can't even remember what codexes were we using. 7th edition codexes.
No, they were gone. You used the index. Your army rules were in the index.
Oh, everything was in. Oh, of course, that's it. Space Marine Index. Xenos. Okay, now I remember. Okay.
Now, don't get me wrong. They didn't get it right with the points.
No,
it wasn't perfect.
No,
it was far from perfect. There were some things which were just silly, broken.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I challenge you to find an edition more balanced for a period than when those indexes were out.
It's a very valid point. Unfortunately, there was no flavour to any of the armies.
I disagree. The flavour was in the data sheets.
I suppose the flavour was also in the models.
Because that's the other complication. Like the data sheets, usually all of these units have their own special rules. There are no universal special rules anymore. So a lot of rules are repeated, just given a different name. You know, across different data sheets and different armies. That's a separate thing. But I think the armies did have a lot of flavour. And I think that it was very easy to just build on that by, you know, if you had a single army stratagem or each sub-faction got their stratagem. See, if I could go back, that's what I would do.
This is what you do if you've got a time machine.
It's what I would do, yeah. I'd go, right, so, you know, when the codexes start dropping for 8th edition, each codex will get... But I would have launched with more universal stratagems. So I'd have 2 pages of universal stratagems. Obviously, there's core things that I'd have to change. This is just wish listing. It's nonsense at the moment.
I like your universal stratagem idea.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Well, I think it's a lot simpler for a player to turn up to the table and say, what's your army stratagem do? And yeah, you're right. It is like an army special rule. But that's a lot easier to explain than go, well, I've got 3 pages of stratagems here in my AdMech book, and here's my Cult of Rust book, my Book of Rust book, where I'm Drakari, you know, here's my Cult of Strife page of stratagems and my relics that I'm using, and I've dipped into Codex Drakari here for this sub-faction, and you're left going, what?
Yeah,
I know.
I can't remember a time where I've been playing a game recently and I've not been looking for a stratagem that I may or may not be able to use.
Of course.
That's how many there are. Sisters of Battle is a perfect example because they're not, it's not quite as complicated as AdMech, but they are quite complicated because you've got the army rules, you've then got the orders, then you've got the sacred rites, then you've got your data sheets, and then you've got your stratagems.
Yeah.
The first few things are fine because it's complicated enough and you can get your head around it, but when you've got 4 pages of stratagems.
Yeah, on top of that.
In no order.
No.
Because you don't know whether in the movement phase or the charge phase or opponent's phase.
I really like your putting them in phase idea. That's really nice.
Well, it would just make it a bit easier to go through. It's like, I'm in my shooting phase. Here are my shooting phase stratagems.
Yeah. Because you could even repeat the same stratagem then. So instead of having a longer worded stratagem saying in the shooting phase or the fighting phase, you just have your shooting phase column, that stratagem appears there. your fighting phase column, it appears there, but the wording's just for the fight phase, just for the shoot.
And then have a section for your opponent's turn if you have those as well. It would at least make it easier to navigate. Whereas at the moment, although they are in their categories based on what they are perceived to be.
Yeah, but no one looks at epic deeds.
No, it's like, I wonder what epic deed I can do in this turn. It doesn't happen. But just to have a bit of organisation.
Yeah, I agree.
That help with the complication.
Here's another idea. What you could do is you could make it more like I mean, this is a sort of thing which they can only do with like an edition reset, which, you know, is whenever that happens will happen. But you could take a nod from Sigmar and limit the CP to a lot less. So that means that any stratagem you use is big because you don't have that many CP. And then you could take it a step further and not have layered. You can. So I can't put reroll hits on one unit and give them another stratagem which gives them reroll wounds. So it's one or the other. Each unit can only be affected by a stratagem once per phase, say, something like that. That's how you'd word it. And then maybe if you only started with, 3 CP and you gain 1 a turn or something like that, that would all of a sudden severely limit the massive chain combos that can be pulled off.
Well, we'd sort out the issues with AdMech.
And break, and to be honest, break certain things.
Well, this is the thing we're seeing at the moment. Basic troops are winning people tournaments at the moment.
Yeah.
Which is bonkers.
Yeah, because they can be chain buffed up so much.
Yeah.
And again, it's the stratagems because they go, well, I have this warlord trait, this warlord trait, this warlord trait. My basic sergeant has this relic, which allows me to do this. Like, everyone's a superhero. And I think that's too much.
I agree.
I think there should be one warlord. One warlord. One trait. It's your warlord. I don't have 5 warlords.
I like the idea of there being like a second in command.
Yeah.
But I don't like what some codexes have where you can give a sergeant abilities like that.
Yeah, and relics. I mean, I'll just take Morvane's Agonizer on my Hecatrix.
Oh, I'll take the Reaper of Glorious Entropy on my whatever they're called, the Death Shroud Terminator every time.
Yeah.
It makes that sergeant stupidly strong.
Yeah.
And why has he got it?
Because you've got so many CP, it makes it a no-brainer.
Yeah.
That you can afford those things and just go, yeah, well, that's obviously what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, look. Those are some potential solutions. Having said all of that, I still absolutely love the game. I still really enjoy playing it. It's just a really interesting discussion to have, isn't it? About, is it too complicated? Could things be adjusted to make it more fun, more easy price of entry? But also, I think it would actually make the game more fun, even at a competitive level. Like, there's nothing worse than, I didn't know you have that stratagem.
Yeah.
And so now I'm going to lose the game based on the fact that you can do this power combo, and I didn't know that you could do it. Whilst that's fair play in a tournament, I think it's a bit sad if you're at your friendly local gaming store and so you get a power combo pulled on you. I didn't realise that your unit could move twice because of this stratagem. So I broke my army here thinking I'm safe and actually I'm not. I don't
know if you agree with this, but I feel like 9th is the first edition where it's definitely catering towards competitive play.
I agree, yeah. I definitely agree.
I think at some point during the design of 9th, someone has decided that they should market it as a competitive game.
Yeah.
And for some people that's great, right?
Yep.
But I think for the majority of people that are just playing friendly games, not tournaments, I feel like there's too much being taken from the competitive scene, which then might adversely affect people just playing normal games.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is that it has to be acknowledged that competitive play does affect the casual scene.
Yeah.
It does, because the casual scene still want to play the game fairly well most of the time and enjoy looking at lists and battle reports and go, oh, this combinations, I've been told this combination's really good. They do it at the friendly local gaming store because it filters down. It trickles down from the competitive scene. To say the competitive scene doesn't affect the casual scene, I think would not be correct. I think it does affect it. So you have to go, look, if you're going to build the game competitively, which I'm all for, that's fine. I think the game should be competitive and as balanced as you can get it. You do need to also be aware of how it affects the casual game because it will affect it. Yeah, it's an interesting topic. It's an interesting topic.
It's a very, very complex topic as well.
Yeah.
It's not. It's like we just said. It's not a bad game.
No, it's
not
an amazing game. I love it.
Sometimes, if you are, you could witness someone being super tactical with all of this stuff that they can do, and it can be a really good game. But I think at the moment it's just a little bit too much.
Yeah.
And it'll be very, very interesting to see how 9th edition feels once all the codexes are released.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it definitely feels a bit bitter playing the 8th ed codexes at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Whether it's Eldari or Chaos Space Marines or Demons.
Yeah.
Not so much with Guards, because weirdly they kind of still work.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough with some books at the moment, and it's a real shame.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that we're just waiting for those books to come out and actually bring more complication. That's the irony. And for me, the biggest thing, I mean, we can wrap on this note, is that if you are building it to be a competitive game, played competitively, which again, I'm all for, because ultimately, if the game became a commercial success in terms of being an e-sport, which I know, that's pretty much what the competitive crowd are pushing for. That's pretty much what they want. They want a standardized, professionalized sport. Now, whether you agree that 40k can ever be that or not, doesn't really matter. What matters is there are people that want it to be that, and that's fine. But if you look at the format of esports, be them computer games, one, the price of entry is nothing. It's the price of the computer game.
Yeah.
The games play much faster.
Yeah.
They're much more easy to televise as a result of that. Okay, so there's a bunch of factors here. The other factor is that a game that takes 3 hours to play plays too long. You need the game to be much quicker. And I know that the ITC back in the day, Reese and Frankie, they put out a proposal. We're thinking of dropping the game to 1650 points, I think it was, or even 15. He gave an option, 1500, 1650. I was all for 1500. And there was a massive outcry. Oh, I want my toys. But the funny thing is that it's quite counterproductive, because actually if you could play more games more quickly, the game will be not only easier to televise, but easier to pick up, and a faster and easier price of entry for people, which means that you'll get more players, which means that there will be more money in it, which means it's much more likely to become an esport.
And the other comparison to make with esports and games and things is that there are regular digital updates for everyone for free.
Yeah, exactly. So
and that's
it would need to be
something
balanced.
That's something that I keep talking about this. This has to happen sooner rather than later. Yeah. My example with the Chaos Space Marine Codex being on sale still.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Like there's so much of it that isn't correct anymore.
Yeah.
But if it just moved to a digital format, and you just focus all of your efforts onto updating digitally all the time, everyone's rules would be the same on the device they're looking at.
Yep. Yep. And then in order to balance the game, you do need to take some of the complexity out of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's very, very difficult to balance a game with this many stratagems. So look, good chat.
Yeah, it was
Thank
an interesting one,
Mr. Beard. What do you guys think? I know it's a bit of a hot topic, but you know, that's my honest appraisal of it. I still love 40k.
Oh yeah, big time. But we're going to keep playing every day.
Worry about that. It's just an interesting point of view, and the good thing is as well, because we don't play competitively all the time. We've got our league series for that. Playing your casual games, you can just use the one book.
Yep.
You know, you can choose the rules that you want to use, right? And it's still awesome fun. But it is interesting to look at it analytically from beginner's point of view, and also a growth point of view if you do want it to become this competitive esports style game. Anyway, we'll join you guys in the comments below. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and opinions. Till next time, I've been Lawrence, this has been Joe, and we'll see you soon.